Okay, so thank you all. Welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. I'm Lisa Friend, and along with my beloved cohorts, colleagues, and friends, Gabe Gunnick, Ben Green, we're going to talk to you tonight about itinerary planning.
Tonight, though, we are so excited to embark on this travel skills-based show about itinerary planning. Back when I was a teacher, on my desk, I had a little quote that said, "Nothing good happens without a plan." And we've done several travel skills shows before, but tonight we're really doing the travel skill that all other travel skills come from. No trip starts without planning an itinerary. So tonight we are going to go through the basics of itinerary planning in 8 separate steps. But we're not just going to be giving you tips. We're also going to be planning an actual trip as we go. Ben, Lisa, and I are going to be dreaming up our MNT dream trip. We take occasional breaks and from our Monday night travel schedule, and we want to plan the trip that we would do together. So at the end of each section tonight, we are going to be planning our trip as we go and applying the knowledge from each step to our dream itinerary so that you can follow along. So if you've never created a European travel itinerary before, we hope that tonight will help highlight some of the pitfalls that first-time travel planners often make. And if you've planned a dozen itineraries before, we hope that this gives you some good reminders and maybe sparks ideas for your next trip. So we are going to get started, but first, Ben and Lisa, as we embark on this journey, just want to say a quick cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, Ben. Cheers to all of you viewers at home. We are excited to begin this journey with you. And so to start things off, we are going to start off with step number 1, which is writing up your travel wish list. So write out your wish list. Now, Rick often talks about turning your travel dreams into reality. But in order to get to reality, you need to start with your dreams. So when travel dreaming, it's important that you don't set limits for yourself. There should be no budget, no set timeline, and no bad ideas. I always say there's no bad ideas in brainstorming. So if you read about a castle in a book one time, put that castle on your wish list. If you want to do a big trip walking across all of England, put that on your wish list. If you want to be on a yacht in the French Riviera, start out by writing out your wish list. And Rick always says that you need to turn your travel dreams into reality, but you can't get to that reality if you don't have your travel dreams first. So I'm a big fan of in brainstorming, there are no bad ideas. You have no budget limit, you have no time limit, reality has not crashed in yet, and just dream. I always think that some of the wildest ideas might contain the kernel of the more realistic idea that you actually go with. If you read a book about somebody that does a 1-month hike across Sweden, yeah, that might not end up being realistic for you, but maybe you budget 2 days for a hike. Or if you want to lounge on a yacht in the French Riviera, maybe that's not going to be realistic budget-wise, but you can find a way to be on the beautiful water and go for a little shoreline cruise in the French Riviera. So I think always you need to start without putting limits on yourself when you start out the itinerary planning process.
That's very true, Gabe, but at the same time, reality says some people must travel at a certain period in time. For example, a teacher may only be able to go in the summer. So while you're dreaming, and that's, of course, one of the best parts of travel planning, also consider when you can actually make your trip, what your non-negotiables are, your non-negotiable dates or time periods, and your must-go-to places as well. I think that that's very important as you're forming your initial plan.
And while you're daydreaming, this is a good time to be introspective. I think I'm echoing what Gabe and Ben are saying so much, but this is the time for you to think about what you like. I especially think about this when I'm traveling by myself because I don't have to make any compromises. I can just think, yes, I want to spend an entire day looking at turtles at an estate on the shores of Lake Como, which I have done. And that's because that's what I felt like. But match your destinations to your interests. If you're a history buff and you're interested in, the tales of Agincourt, then you're going to want to go to Western France. Or if you're an art lover, you're going to want to see the Louvre and the Orsay and the Orangerie and the Marmottan Museum. If you're outdoorsy, well, there are a lot of places that you can spend a lot of really quality outdoorsy times, but you want to make sure that you work that into your overall rough daydreamy plan.
So we are now going to go over our dreams for our Monday night travel dream trip that we talked about. So for our dream trip, each one of us is going to go through our little wish list.
Is this clicker not working?
I don't think so. So Ben, how about you start off and tell us which places you're dreaming of traveling?
Thank you, Gabe. Well, you can follow the Green Star. I am interested in Scotland. I've never been. The Dolomites look incredible, just gorgeous. I love hiking, so it calls to me. The southern Balkans, or the Adriatic region there also is of interest. And Romania and Bulgaria have been on my list for a really long time. So those are my wish list for destinations.
So on my wish list, way up there in the corner, those who have watched Monday Night Travel for a while know that one of my favorite trips recently was the Faroe Islands, and I would love to get some more of that Nordic island feeling by going to Iceland. Conversely, I would love to go to the south of France. I lived in southwestern France for a while, but I've never been to Provence. I would love to go there. I've been enchanted with the idea of going to Slovenia. I love the idea of going where the Italian, Slavic, and Germanic worlds kind of collide. And then ever since reading Madeline Miller's book, Song of Achilles, I've really wanted to go to Greece.
Okay, well, that might line up with some of the stuff that I want to do. Ireland has my heart and my soul ever since I did the Dublin Marathon in 1999. So Ireland is on my list. I want to go to the Istrian Peninsula. I haven't spent a lot of time there, but there's a lot of culture and history and great food packed into a small little peninsula in Croatia, not that far from the Italian border. I also want to go to Greece. I have a good friend who lives there, and I've never been to Greece. And then Poland has been on my list for a long time. I have been to Poland and I loved it, and I thought this is a country that deserves more exploration.
Also, now that we're brainstorming, Lisa, I'm realizing that you and I have both completed marathons, but I don't think that Ben has.
We better get
We
that.
might have to add a marathon to our itinerary.
I'd be happy with that,
In Greece, in marathon.
Yeah, the Athens Classic Marathon.
as long as it's not in summer. I'll do it.
So you can see here, we plotted out, this is our big brainstorm map. And just looking at this, at least for me, I'm realizing it feels like we kind of have two main trips here. We have one that is kind of Scandinavia and British Isles, or maybe we could do one that's more Central and Eastern Europe.
There's a lot of stars clustered over in that southeastern area.
We could schedule an MNT trip in late May. That's about the time we normally have our MNT spring break, isn't it? Like
Yes.
Gabe and Lisa. And Central Europe would be excellent at that time. Why not?
Okay, so
Great.
we have a little bit of a plan.
So we're kind of narrowing it down to Central Eastern Europe for now.
Okay,
All right.
so I don't need that. Thank you very much. So I would like to start off with, now we've done our daydreaming and we have some rough idea, but we need to start with the first steps. So pull out a map. I'm a visual learner. Get yourself a map and plot things out. I will literally like take a Sharpie and circle things just like we put the stars on the map and come up with a logical sequence. So we've done that. We can see that the stars are aligned near Italy, in Slovenia, Croatia, Greece, and then Poland. And you can actually make a somewhat logical route out of that. But before we get to the full route, I just want to point out that the next thing we need is a calendar. And as someone who has worked in the travel business for a long time, as we all have, the travel business likes to say that you get 7 days and 6 nights because that's how they sell you cruises and times at resorts, etc. But when you're planning your trip, it's actually the inverse. For every three nights, you get 2 full days plus whatever you get on your travel day. So just remember, 2 nights equals a full day, 3 nights equals 2 full days. You lose a day going over. When you leave the US, you're gonna fly overnight and arrive in Europe the next day, but you kind of get it back. When I leave Paris at 4 p.m., I get back into Seattle at 5 p.m. the same day, and it's as if nothing happened. One of the resources that you might want to use, especially if you're interested in train travel or just figuring out distances, is our rail map. So this is a time and cost map that we have on our website, and you can see, for example, Paris to Brussels. It has, what does it say, 115-2. So the first part is the cost of a ticket that you buy on that day. Gabe's gonna talk more about buying tickets and saving money, but that's the walk-up price, and 2 hours is the length of the duration of the trip. So for example, Paris to Brussels, 2 hours. But if you see Munich to Berlin, you can see that that's 5 hours. And you can rest assured when you're looking at this map that if we've put lines in between these places and figured out the times, that it's pretty much going to be a direct high-speed train. So it does give you some idea of how long it's going to take for you to get between major cities. So besides the rail planner, I would also say if you want really good information, and again, we'll dive into this deeper, but bahn.com, BAHN.com is the website that we use frequently here for looking up train schedules, because even though it's German, it works all over Europe. Now, keeping in mind that when you travel north of the Alps in the summer is a beautiful destination, great in the summer. It's good weather, it's long days, but also this is when they have all their festivals. Just like back home here, Seattle's a great destination in the summer because this is when we have all our outdoor movies and concerts, etc. It's the same in Northern Europe. So this is a Highland Games that I went to. And then I certainly want to see, when I'm traveling, things I can't see at home. So I went and had this beautiful dinner at this little Michelin-starred restaurant on an island in the north of Scotland. And when I left, it was pretty much the land of the midnight sun. This was 11:40 at night when I walked out after dinner, and the sun was still in the sky. So keep those sort of natural phenomena. If there's something you've always wanted to see, that's something you should keep in mind. And then summer can be rough south of the Alps. So intense sun, heat wave, wear your sunglasses and sun hats. It's something that you really want to keep in mind. I love Rome, and if the only time I can go to Rome is July, well, I'll be prepared for it. But if we're talking about a perfect trip, it's not going to be my first destination. Rome's going to be my first destination in March, April, May, September, October, November, maybe not June, July, and August. So, and then I want you to consider what is going to be exotic and or scary at the beginning of your trip. So I want you to start by dipping your toes in. I want you to learn how to use public transportation in London, where you know how to pronounce everything. You can ask people nearby, excuse me, you speak English, that's great, can you help me with this? So you get your feet wet, you learn how to use the public transportation in London. So then you can go to Paris, and now everything still looks really similar, but the pronunciation's a little bit different, but you've already mastered the system. So by the time your trip gets a little bit hairier, so to speak, you've gone to Russia and you're looking at things in the Cyrillic alphabet, and you already know how a subway system works, and you're ready to go. So keep in mind that you want to start with the easier countries and work your way up to the ones that are more exotic and or difficult.
And I think, Lisa, with that, it also depends on the traveler. I think we were talking about this before. I'm at a point, I've gone on enough trips that I just went directly to Istanbul on my trip last year, and it's overwhelming, but I've traveled enough times that I enjoyed the culture shock. Whereas my first time abroad studying in the UK, I felt kind of like discombobulated just by being in the UK. So
yeah, I think, but with practice, I mean, we're sort of assuming that this is their first trip, maybe, and so they're going to want to move in that direction and not deep dive into Istanbul. But I wish I had my Istanbul slide for their metro, because they have a picture of a man and he's sitting like this. He's totally man-spreading, and there's a big line, and no man-spreading. I went, Turkey, way to go. All right, well, let's take that those great tips that you just gave us, Lisa, and let's apply some to this dream trip that we're brewing. So our map of the places that we're interested in is right here. And what are you thinking, Lisa? I'm thinking that we could do a lot of this by train, except the stuff in the Southwest that we'd maybe be better off without Greece and the Balkans. Sorry, Ben. But because the Dolomites and Slovenia and Croatia are all really close there, and then we could talk about getting up to Poland. We could fly or we could take a train. So I think if we cut some of these things, we'd have a really good trip that made sense.
I agree. We still definitely have too much, and so much of trip planning is gradually paring back. So I like that focus on staying a bit more northern. And as I'll expound on shortly, I love train travel. So if we could get a train and maybe, stop in Vienna or Bratislava, halfway between like Slovenia and Poland, I think that sounds fantastic.
I agree, and I know that I put the Dolomites on my wish list, and it's definitely on my wish list, but it's a little out of the way for this itinerary. So if we're not going to prioritize it, all of us, then I think that's one that we could cut.
And we'll be in Slovenia, so we could do a hike in the Julian Alps.
Very true.
Which is just one over. It's just,
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think that we will get better, we'll get better flights if we fly into Venice than Ljubljana.
Potentially, that is true.
Okay. Well, I think we can generally kind of narrow our itinerary down a little bit to start kind of clustered around Slovenia, Istria, and then maybe go up to Poland, but find a place to stop along the way so that we don't have a brutally long train day.
Yeah, I don't do night trains at my age.
Great. All right. Well, our trip is taking shape.
And we will need to take flight, or at least be thinking about how we're going to take flight.
So
I want to take a cargo ship 2 weeks across the Atlantic.
Hey, I dream of that. Will you, with your research, you would decide if we were going into Venice or if we were going into Ljubljana, right?
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I was going to mention later. I'll mention it now.
Oh, sorry.
Lisa, please. There are oftentimes many airports that might work for your itinerary. For example, in Italy, right? Milan, Florence, Rome, Venice, these are not that far apart by train, and they all have reasonable connections with many major US airports. So be flexible when you're considering where you enter and exit Europe. And more on that in just a minute. So of course, flights, a major factor when planning your trip. Once you have a rough route and timeline, or perhaps in coordination with planning a route and timeline, that is when you really consider where you might fly in and out of. And one of our favorite tools is skyscanner.com. This is an excellent way to search flight options. So you see here I've put Seattle to Venice, Gdansk to Seattle for estimated dates that we have in mind. And we suggest, once you found a flight you like on skyscanner.com or Google Flights or whatever other tool you like to use, Lisa,
Kayak?
you like Kayak.
I like Kayak because
Yeah.
I like the filters.
We recommend that you then go to the airline and book directly. That's a safer bet to go that route. And also you can set up price alerts. So Google Flights, among others, has options where you can set it up so that it alerts you when there's a drop in the fare. We get a lot of questions about airlines. What's the best airline for my trip to Europe? And I would say that, well, that's a factor. And, we all have airlines that we like more than others. It's really one of several or more than several factors to consider when picking your flight. Because, for example, Icelandair, this is routes for Icelandair from North America to Europe, is a budget carrier and doesn't include food. They have often very seamless transfers in Reykjavik that for many cities in Europe make them among the most efficient flight options from the US. So there's pros and cons, and Skyscanner can help you, or another tool online can help you weigh those. One important consideration is the multi-city flight. Of course, we know about round trips, Seattle to London and back. You can also, in a single ticket, buy Seattle to London, Paris to Seattle. And although this can sometimes be the same price, sometimes it can be more expensive, it just depends. You can check, again, on a website like Skyscanner. This can help you not backtrack. Okay, so it can be more efficient and save you time, even if it may be a little bit more expensive. It might just be worth it. And we'll see if a multi-city flight will be best for our itinerary shortly.
Now, I don't know if I've personally experienced this, but it could be a real thing, and maybe one of you two may have a comment on it. This idea that when you consistently search over and over again on the same website, it tracks you and raises the prices for you when you're considering your airfare. Have you ever encountered this? Do you think it's real?
I believe this to be true.
Well, one solution is going incognito or private browsing. So you see on the left how it looks for a Mac, on the Apple, and on the right how it looks for Google Chrome. You just go to the three dots in the upper right and then click New Incognito Window, and that prevents the website from tracking your search history so that this supposed flight increase doesn't happen when you're searching for flights. So keep that in mind.
I also think that my phone is listening to me all the time. So I feel like I need to put my phone in a separate room when I'm planning.
Well, you know, there might be something to it, because when you go look up shoes online, 5 minutes later, you're on a different website and there's the advertisement for those shoes, right?
I really screwed up the algorithm when I was doing travel consulting, because I'd be searching for flights all day long to different places. So I just really blew it out of the water.
You might also consider what ground transportation you'll have, at least as a preliminary, in a preliminary way, when deciding your flights. Because with car rentals, a one-way car rental that you drop off in a different country may cost you significantly more. So ideally, you would at least have a sense of what ground transportation will work for your flight plan in advance. And Lisbon is actually a great city to pick up a car. I did this last year when I put on my Rick Steves Europe guidebook research hat and drove down to the Algarve for a week of research. And I just then went back to Lisbon with the car, and that worked beautifully. So keep that in mind as well. And if you're looking for more information on this, whether it be flights to and from Europe or transportation on the ground, Lisa, you hosted a program, it was in 2023 already, if you can believe that, on planes, trains, and automobiles, and that is on our website. So
Yeah.
an excellent tool.
Chock full of information about driving in Europe, taking trains in Europe, and booking flights.
So selecting flights for your itinerary, no matter how simple or complex, are an important step when designing your itinerary. And hopefully no one has to ever book any last minute flights for an emergency. My most memorable flight was probably in February 2022 when I left Russia immediately after they invaded Ukraine. And so this was St. Petersburg when I said goodbye after 6 months there. Okay, let's take what we've discussed here and apply it to our MNT dream trip.
Yeah, Ben, tell us what that means for us.
Yeah.
It means basic economy, Lisa.
No. Lisa does not fly basic economy.
Gabe is 6'3" and he flies basic economy.
How can you do that? How can you sit in a middle
It's
seat
called-
for 10 hours?
It's called never having been in anything better, so I don't know what I'm
No,
missing
I'm
out
not.
on.
No, okay. So we need to talk about this, because I'm not talking about the different classes of service, like economy, premium select, Delta One, whatever airline. They've all got their names, and most often they're now doing 3 or 4 classes of service. I'm talking about the class of ticket. So when you see that basic economy, it means I'm not getting a seat assignment. I'm not getting any frequent flyer miles. I'm not getting anything because I am
I will say now,
non-refundable, non-changeable. No.
if you do have to be careful, because now I feel like some of the budget airlines that operate within Europe, if you get the most bare bones price, sometimes you have to pay an additional fee just for your carry-on luggage.
Yeah.
So I always get the cheapest one that at least includes the carry-on luggage, but that's not as a concern when you're flying transatlantic.
Right. And it really depends. Everyone's going to be different on this point. Everyone's going to have a different budget. It somewhat depends as well, potentially, on whether you're traveling solo or with a group, because maybe we want to sit together. So maybe we want to pay for the economy main so that we can pick our seats right away versus economy basic, where you often are not given that choice. When I'm traveling solo, I tend to be a bit more of a budget traveler and get economy basic. But anyway.
Well, let's see what you found, Ben.
Just before you, oh my God, this is so stressful for me. Okay, I want you to understand that it's not because I'm such a princess, even though, okay, I'm totally a princess, but it's because I'm claustrophobic. The thought of being anywhere but an aisle seat for 10 hours is not, I can't do it. I won't even, a window either, no. But that's why I have to have seat assignments, and that's why I have to book the best ticket. Not, I'm totally fine in economy. Look at me. I'm like short little legs. I'm okay with that. But
Well, and sometimes you can book economy basic and then book your seat on economy basic. It really depends on how that value compares to upgrading
Yes.
to the main.
But what did you find for us, Ben?
Yes, so we've established Venice. I suppose you both
We get to go
wanna-
to Venice.
Yeah.
We get to go to Venice.
We can go to Venice. We can then go over to Slovenia and Istria, up to Vienna, and finish in Poland. So again, I've gone to Skyscanner and done some research for us, and I found what I think is near perfection for the route.
Okay,
So we have Seattle to Venice with a beautiful 2.5 hour transfer time. That's just about
That's
right.
a perfect transfer time.
yes.
And 2 hours, 10 minutes on the return from Gdansk in northern Poland. So quick, efficient. The only thing is there's an early departure from Gdansk on the 9th, 6:20 in the
I
morning.
gotta be at the airport at 4:20 in the morning.
You do.
Okay, well, I can do it.
But it's Delta, Lisa. You like
I
Delta.
do like Delta.
So this is our plan. And the price for economy basic was $13.74, which this time of year is okay. I think it's average. The upgrade to economy main, I know you don't call it an upgrade, Lisa, is $200. So it would be $15.74 for economy main, which I think is fairly standard for close to high season.
Yes, because we are leaving in May and coming back in June. Yeah, so you've got a summer month in there. I would say $1,500 for round trip in and out of Europe. And these are not big airports. Like the Venice airport's pretty small, and the Gdansk airport, I imagine, is
It's
also
not big either.
Yeah, so I think that you did an excellent job.
Thank you very much.
All right, so there is our updated map for our trip. I'm getting increasingly excited about it, but it's not just planes that you need to be factoring in while you're planning your trip, also transportation. As I said, itinerary planning is kind of the start of all your other travel details. So I'm gonna keep this fairly high level. I'm not gonna go into the nitty-gritty of specifically how to buy tickets for certain things. We're just going to look at transportation in regards to how it impacts the big picture of your itinerary. And the first thing that I want to say is, as the adage goes, it's not just about the destinations, it is about the journeys between the destinations. And that's very true of European travel. This is me and my friend Micah on a recent trip where we took the ferry from Germany to Denmark. It would have been faster and probably a little cheaper to take the train, but this was a really memorable experience. We took a bus that went onto this enormous ferry, and we had these beautiful views over the sea as we went across. And it was a valuable way that the journey was a big part of our trip. We've talked about Rome to Rio before, and this is a great place to start, not to finish, but to start. You can search for any two places, for example, Prague to Munich, and it's just going to give you a quick visual of the different routes that you could take by different transportation types and estimates for, on average, how long is it going to take and what is the price going to be. You can then click on the various options and it will send you to the actual websites of the bus and train companies to look at the actual timetables. But this is a nice way to just start out visualizing and see what your options are.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Rome to Rio does come with its drawbacks, but it is especially good at finding which bus companies service which routes.
Especially for like once you get into smaller regional buses. I personally am a big train boy. This is me with my hero, the Deutsche Bahn train in Germany. And there are a few reasons that I highly recommend always choosing train first if you can. First and best is that you go city center to city center. I can go from Frankfurt train station, you see these people just milling about in the middle of the city, to this beautiful train station in the center of Amsterdam in 4 hours. Now, the flight is only an hour and 20 minutes, but you have to factor in that you have to find a way to get half an hour outside of town to get to the airport. You want to get there 2 hours early, go through all the security, make that flight. Now you're on the outskirts of another city, having to find your way back in. All in all, it's going to take about the same amount of time total, but taking the train is just a smoother experience. This is one of my train rides. I just love watching the countryside go by, seeing the farms. It's a lot more relaxed. You get a little bit more space. So my friend and I just have some lightweight travel games that we bring with us and play on the train in a way that I could not on an airplane. You just get to see the locals. You're going to see the local people on trains a lot more than on flights. And this was a lovely moment of just this older gentleman just giving some candy to this brother and sister that were there with their mom on the train. And I put this image of these green trains to remember for me to say that it is the greenest mode of transportation. It has a far smaller carbon footprint than driving and flying do. So I just think taking a train is a win-win-win if you can. And I know all of us kind of have different tipping points. For me, I love trains so much that if it's a single digit number of hours, I will take the train over a flight. But I know that some people have lower tipping points.
My tipping point is still pretty high. If
Yeah.
it's 6 hours or less on a direct train, I am 100% going to take the train all the time. I was going to, before we ask Ben what his tipping point is, I was also going to say is that you did not say that you will also have to repack all your liquids if you want to get on an airplane, and that will drive me nuts. So there's a reason to take the train right there.
Serious inconveniences, for sure. I would say 7 hours is probably mine. Yeah, between the two of you.
And of course, I'm not going to go into all the minutia, but definitely check to see if you would benefit from a rail pass. They're not as universally beneficial as they were a few decades ago, but you can go to ricksteves.com/rail, this website right here, and find tips on whether you should get a rail pass or not and route details by country. Also, I highly recommend on travel days, make sure that you book some flexible travel. So this was me after I landed in Frankfurt a couple summers ago, and I had to immediately connect to a train. And this was, you can't even see most of this line. It zigzags way to the right. And there was one person checking passports for a couple hundred people. And I ended up needing to actually like power walk a full mile from the airport to my train. That's me power walking. And I just barely made it in time. You can see I'm like wiping sweat away. And I rushed because I really wanted to make that train for convenience, but I was also smart, a rare example of me being smart. And I booked a flexi ticket. So if I had missed the train, I would have had to have waited an hour, but I could have gotten the next one. And so I always try to get a flexible ticket if I have a train after a flight. Briefly, car rentals are especially a good option if you're going to smaller towns and countryside. So this is the Faroe Islands. We really needed to get a car. A few very quick tips, and again, you can find a lot more information in that transportation travel skills class. But make sure that you're dropping your car off in the same country you pick it up in. If you drop off in different countries, there are sometimes exorbitant fees that go along with that. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Always get a collision damage waiver. You can return your rental car in a heaping pile of rubble and just walk away from it carefree. Learn local driving laws. I'm going to jump ahead here. On autoeurope.com, you can find country by country driving information, which I highly recommend. You want to try to avoid major city centers because they're congested, but also in places like Italy, there's certain zones that you can't drive without a special permit. And trust me, you do not want to get a traffic ticket abroad because oftentimes you won't even know you got it until months later, and it can be really tricky to figure out how to pay it. I have certainly been in that situation. But be careful. This is, make sure that you research the driving laws. This was me and my friend driving in the Faroe Islands, going into a 1-lane tunnel. So also just make sure that you have the guts for driving in certain areas, because we were very grateful there wasn't another car coming towards us.
That's not a short tunnel.
It's not a short tunnel. You can't see the other side.
It looks like a cave.
Last notes, don't forget about buses. While it is not my preferred method of transportation, in some countries like Spain, they have a few good high-speed rail lines, but I studied in a less populous region of Spain, and they had much better bus lines than rail lines. And of course, if you can get on a ferry, I highly recommend
Get
it.
on a ferry. So we were talking about buses earlier because I said, I'm not taking a bus. Because we already know that I'm claustrophobic. And Ben's like, some of those buses are cheap enough that you can just buy the ticket. You can just buy an extra ticket and have the seat next to you empty. Because I don't really want to be sitting next to a stranger for 5 hours.
I'll let you sit in the aisle seat, Lisa. You just have to let me put my head
I
on your
would
shoulder.
I would take a train or bus. I would take a bus with you. It's more because I travel a lot by myself, and so
Well, we may be able to avoid buses entirely for our trip. We'll see.
We shall see. Well, let's get to that now. So here's our dream trip. Looking at transportation, I do wonder if we might need to take one bus. We might.
no.
We can go
No.
with from Venice. We can go with the Go Opti, right, Lisa?
Yeah, so there's a shuttle company called Go Opti, GOOPTI, and you can do it with it's a minivan or van, and you can do it where you share with the other people, so it's just like a car driver, but it's their website is very easy to deal with. You just put in the drop downs and say, I want you to pick me up at the Venice parking lot, and I want you to drop me off in downtown Ljubljana or Lake Bled or where have you. So Go Opti shuttle would be my first choice for getting us to Slovenia because it's way better than the train, which doesn't particularly work very well.
And then I'm guessing, is there any part that we're going to want a car rental for this? I'm seeing a lot of major cities in the second half.
Yes. Well, Istria is it's recommended to have a car at least. There are some buses, but these are very small towns. A car is the way to go, and we can easily pick one up in Ljubljana, go to Istria for a few nights, and then return to Ljubljana with the car.
And that's fine, just it's fine for us to go into Croatia, just so long as we're returning it back where we picked it up in Slovenia.
Yes, there should be no drop-off fees for that.
And then from there, it's just trains, right?
Yes, Poland will be fine by
Unless
train.
you want to fly, because it's really far from Ljubljana to.
I think
Well, but that's why we're stopping in Vienna.
Oh, did they know we were stopping in Vienna? I
Oh.
didn't think we
You
had told them
mentioned
yet.
it
You did?
briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, we made the decision to stop in Vienna so we wouldn't have a brutally long train
And
trip,
Lisa, you have the lowest tipping point between train and flight.
which still is not low.
It's not low. 6 hours. Come on.
And all of our trips are below the tipping point, I believe.
Well, I did mark the Venice to Ljubljana as a bus, but we'll know it's a shuttle.
Yeah.
It's a shuttle. All right, well, this trip is shaping up looking great to me. We are going to move on to making a rough itinerary. So now we're going to start assigning specific dates to this. I showed this image. This is from our tours webpage, and all of our tours have one of these itineraries that I just think are a great example of a nice, good visual for an itinerary showing our route, how many nights we're going to spend in each place. This is the itinerary I did this past September on our Best of Bulgaria tour. The first thing, as Ben mentioned earlier, you need to know, do you have to be in any specific places on specific times, at specific times, and on specific dates? So this was my 2019 trip to Germany, and I had two very specific dates. I was running the Berlin Marathon, and I was going with some friends to Oktoberfest. So you want to start with those and plan the rest of your trip around it. Also, I enjoyed my alcohol-full beer in the warm tent much more than my alcohol-free beer after the race after running 25 miles.
But how German that they give you a beer after doing
I
a marathon,
know.
even if it's alcohol free. Lovely.
I know, very German, because it's also responsible.
Yeah, because you don't want to be even more dehydrated, right, after
true.
running that long.
I want to forget at the end of a marathon. So another thing, Lisa mentioned this, but it bears repeating. You need to remember, and it's so easy to forget, that when you're looking at the number of full days you have in a place, that is the number of nights minus one. So you might think, oh, 2 nights in a place, that sounds like enough, but you're really just having 1 full day in that place with travel days on either end. So as an example, I'm again borrowing some of our tour itineraries, but our Barcelona and Madrid tour, there's 3 nights in Barcelona, that's 2 full days. 4 nights in Madrid, that's 3 full days, though one of them is a day trip to Toledo. I also want to say, even if you're traveling independently, I often recommend to people to look at our tour itineraries as inspiration. That said, word of caution, you will not get the same amount of efficiency by yourself. it just is simply not possible because on our tours, you are on a bus with our group that takes you from exactly one place you want to go to another place you want to go. You have a guide that's showing you around so you don't have to spend time figuring out the city or making some of the mistakes you might make on your own. So these are great inspiration, but you'll want to add a couple nights. That Ireland tour would be very fast paced by yourself. You're really only spending 2 or sometimes just 1 night.
Even just the parking of your car, because if you're going to do this Ireland one, you're probably doing it by car. A tour bus drops you right where you need to be, as you said, but if you're driving, you got to figure out where to park, how to pay to park. I mean, that takes time.
Yep. So nothing against anybody's travel abilities. It's just when you're by yourself, it takes a little bit longer. And also, I always say, do not schedule. I'm a big fan of, I almost never schedule a time-sensitive thing on a travel day. That's me again rushing to the train thinking, I'm so glad I didn't schedule anything inflexible today. Because if on that same trip, I love trains, but there was a tree down on the train tracks. I'm so glad I didn't have a tour booked for that evening. So I really only book time-specific things on those full days that I'm in cities, not on my travel days.
Can I add something?
Of course.
I have a rule where I always have to be sleeping in the town I'm going to fly out of the night before for the same reason.
I absolutely have the same rule.
Yeah,
Great point.
yeah. Maybe in Switzerland you can make a slight exception if you're not too far away because those trains are so reliable, but in general, it's the right thing to do.
Also, in general, we advise against doing just 1 night in a place. I will paint you 2 pictures from my travels. There are times that it can make sense. So this is a time that I actually feel like I did it really well. This is that same Germany trip. I was down in Salzburg. I had to get up to Berlin and I thought, I really want to stop in Leipzig. It's not one of the major cities, but it seems interesting. It's only a little over an hour on the train from Berlin. I can do that in 1 night. And that ended up being really comfortable. It can be a little inconvenient to just spend 1 night in a hotel. But other than that, you can see I was very happy with my choices in Leipzig for 1 night. I was not so happy when I was 25 years old and trying to travel extra cheap and took an overnight bus from a small town in Spain to Porto, got to Porto at 6 a.m., spent the day in Porto and 1 night, then woke up at 3 a.m. to catch an early flight from Porto to the Netherlands to get on a train to rural Netherlands to visit my family.
Wow.
That was not a good 1 night stay. And you can see that was me July 16 at 2:35 a.m. and July 17 at 5:55. Now, I'm guessing not many people would be trying to be that budget that are on this call, but
We all made those mistakes in our 20s.
it's easy when you're sitting cozy at home on your laptop thinking, "Oh, I can wake up early a couple days in a row." But be kind to your future self and don't do 1 night in 2 very disparate places.
I mean, to be fair though, Gabe, you look energetic in both of these pictures.
Yeah, I was faking it. So. All right, and just a couple more quick notes. Plan a vacation from your vacation. This was my first trip in mainland Europe and continental Europe. My friend and I had 3.5 brutal weeks of sightseeing, seeing every site in the Rick Steves book, which is great, but you can only sustain that rate for so long. So we had 1 day, it was actually kind of chilly, but we were determined to have a beach day in Villefranche. And it really gave us the energy that we needed to get to the end of that busy trip. And that's something that we also do in our tours. So on our Best of Bulgaria tour, we had a vacation from our vacation in Varna along the Black Sea coast, where a bunch of us went for a swim. On the Best of Switzerland tour, we had a vacation from your vacation day in the Lauterbrunnen Valley to just hike. And I recommend even planning your own trip. Give yourself one of those vacation from your vacation days in the middle. And the last thing I'll say is assume you'll go back. You might not go back to every place that you go, but you cannot see every single thing in a place. And so if you assume you'll go back, you can be happy about the things that you did see instead of worrying about all those things that you didn't. So York is my favorite place that I do go back to. But I say, even if you're not gonna go back, probably just lie to yourself. So,
Yeah.
all right, in terms of our trip, Ben drafted this itinerary for us on a calendar. And if we look at what that looks like on our map, We add in the various number of nights. And
Okay, is it worth spending a night in Venice? Is it really?
Absolutely. Venice is
Yes.
amazing at night. If you told me I could never go to Venice at 9 o'clock at night again, I would cry. If you told me I didn't have to go to Venice at high noon, I'd be okay. But if we get there, what was it, 4 or 5 o'clock? Take a boat. It's going to take us about an hour to get in from the airport. We can have dinner. I'll have a nice place lined up. We can stroll around till 10 o'clock at night, work off our jet lag, then we can get up. And then because we're going to have jet lag, we're all going to be up at 4 in the morning anyway, and we can go to the Rialto Fish Market and cruise around, and then we can check out of our hotel and meet our Go Opti shuttle around 11.
Well, that was very convincing.
we've all been to Venice before, right?
Yes.
So I think this is an example of a thoughtful one night in a place. Like, we know it's not enough time to see everything, but we've also been there before and seen a lot of the major sites. So we're making an intentional decision to just luxuriate in the floodlit Venice evening and
Gonna have a
nighttime.
spritz,
Drinking an Aperol
Aperol,
spritz.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to object to this, but I'm okay with it.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Venezia.
That's Venezia.
But we have to think about the next stop. So we're going to Slovenia because Gabe wanted to. And we have the choice of Ljubljana, the capital city, or Lake Bled, which is just 30, 45 minutes away, which is a charming little town on a lake. So we need to think about where we would rather sleep that night.
I would vote for Ljubljana. I think it's more centrally located for picking up the rental car, easy buses to get to Lake Bled. And I just think that in the evening, there'll be more for us to do as well, the three of us.
Yeah.
I have to agree. If I were maybe with my family or my husband, I might go with Lake Bled because it's smaller and a little bit more romantic. But with these three crazy kids, we gotta go to Ljubljana.
All right. Excellent. Well, I think that this is looking like it is in good shape. So our next step is to make some little tweaks and adjustments, Ben.
Yes, and I think actually we have two segments where we're going to be making some small tweaks and adjustments. So if your rough itinerary doesn't quite match your budget or timeline, this is an important section to pay attention to. And, Lisa mentioned redundancy on a broader scale. There's also a potential for redundancy from town to town. For example, in England, there are two great university towns, Oxford and Cambridge, and most people really, especially for a first-time trip to England, should be picking just one. They both offer a similar experience. Rick prefers Cambridge, by the way. Do either of you have an opinion?
I prefer Oxford.
Interesting, Gabe.
I've only been to Cambridge, so I already followed this advice.
Oh, well, I prefer Oxford because it's on the edge of the Cotswolds. And it's going to fit into my other sightseeing plans better.
That makes sense. Yeah. And, we can help with this. In our guidebook, we list prioritization for many places, many countries. And so here you see in red, must-see destinations, green, try hard to see, and blue, worthwhile. This is just a general plan. Of course, you may have your particular interests, as Lisa discussed at the outset of this presentation, that will draw you elsewhere. But our goal here is for a first or second time sightseer to help you prioritize.
I think that's one of the best things about our products is it's hard opinions.
Yeah, that's right. We do a great job with that in the books. Also, regarding budget, primary cities can be expensive. They're often more expensive than secondary cities. So why not consider great cities, great alternatives like Gdansk, which has a fabulous old town, as you see here, world-class museums, truly excellent museums, and a rich heritage and culture. It's a bit cheaper than, say, Krakow, which is also fantastic, of course. So consider second cities when you're planning your trip. And we actually recently hosted a show on second cities in Europe that you can find at ricksteves.com/MNT as well. And further fine tuning. Okay, in my experience, many North Americans, when planning a trip, simply try to do too much. I think that's more common than trying to do too little. And so this here is an example on the left of writing out the number of days you have in each place and saying, okay, that's too many. What can I cut? And oftentimes you can pare back the number of destinations or even potentially the number of days you spend in a place to fit your timeline and budget. So Paris, this itinerary started with 5 days. That's quite a bit for Paris. I mean, there's plenty to do, but you could easily cut that back to 4 and still have a fantastic visit to the city. So don't do too much. So let's take that mindset to our trip.
Yeah, I think it was Coco Chanel, the designer, right? That said, like, before you leave, always take one thing off before you walk
Put
out the
on
door.
all your jewelry and take off one piece before you leave.
So I feel like looking at our itinerary, Ben, hearing you enthuse about Gdansk, I'm wondering if that day trip to Torun, which is that one night stop in Poland, if that might be the thing we need to take off before walking out the door and heading to the airport.
I think that that's a wise idea, Gabe, particularly because we're leaving Gdansk so early that final morning. It's going to be no time in Gdansk that day. So let's do it.
Okay, great. So I think that'll be our little tweak for our itinerary. And I love that we're going to get to spend more time in Gdansk.
So now it's really coming together, nearly finalized.
All right.
But now we must fine tune. This is where I get super excited about this stuff because I love to get lost in the details. So you want to think about how much time do you need for a site? How much do you need to book it in advance? So I have a picture of Versailles here that I took myself in February of last year. So you might think, oh, this is pretty crowded. No, Versailles is crowded when you can't move without touching someone. This was a medium day, but you need to know that you need to book it in advance. You need to know that it's going to take you 35 minutes to get there from downtown Paris on a train. And you need to know that that it's closed one day a week. That the time of year that you go matters and the time of the week matters. And I'll tell you why, because if you go in the off season, like my sweet daughter Nora is here, we are in the gardens. Now in the summer, they have the gardens open, they have the fountains going, and you actually pay more on Saturdays and Sundays because of the gardens. In the winter, the gardens are asleep, but you can still go out to the little chateaus, the Petit Hameau and the, I can't think of the names right now, but the little chateau and the bigger little chateau. So you want to keep that in mind because Versailles, the actual palace itself, you can get done with that in 3 hours or less. But then if you want to go to these other little palaces, that's what's going to start costing you quite a bit time-wise. And I would highly recommend going out here to the Hameau where Marie Antoinette played with her perfumed sheep, because it's quite charming. Also, you want to really do your due diligence when it comes to museum times. So probably you all know that you need to book the Louvre ahead of time, but did you know that the Louvre is open late on Friday nights? And if you go an hour and a half before the museum closes, you can stand in front of Mona Lisa without everybody behind you or in front of you. I guess that's more important, in front of you. And then I would always recommend that you contact or at least surf around on the tourist information website for the place that you're going, because we're going to talk about this. One of these gentlemen is going to say, Lisa, we're going to be in Venice. Should we go to the opera? And I'm going to go, no, we shouldn't. Why? Vienna. What did I say?
Venice.
Oh, we definitely should go to Venice. We're also going to go to Vienna. And should we go to the opera? Well, we could, but the opera season is really happening more in the traditional school year. They do have programs where you can see the opera in the summer. But what is more fun is to go to the Rathaus, to the city hall, and they have food stalls and booths in front, and they play musical films. So there's a musical film festival, and I thought you would like that. So you would find that by using our guidebooks, but also please spend some time on the website of the Tourist Information Office of the place that you're going. And then you also want to keep in mind if there are any restaurants that you want to go to. This is one of my favorite restaurants in Venice. The food is great, but it also, you sit in a garden under the stars. It's called Al Nono Risorto. But I would make reservations for this place to take you guys there when we go for our one night in Venice, because it's worthwhile. So those are the kinds of things that you want to keep in mind when you are planning your itinerary, things like restaurants, tours, what do you have to book in advance, and how long is it going to take you to see something? So that's some fine tuning information for you.
So a few examples, we put in just a few examples for the trip that we'll be taking. Obviously, there are many more, but like you said, planning ahead for, I mean, it's a good thing that for our trip, we're not going to be in Vienna on a Sunday so that we can go to the
Noschmarkt.
Noschmarkt. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's a
you.
great little farmer's market, super fun.
And then Ben, I know you said that Krakow, Auschwitz is going to be a day trip outside of Krakow, and so we'll want to kind of plan ahead for that day trip.
Yes, because you need to reserve, and you also need to consider the transportation, either bus, you can take a train, or hiring a guide or driver. And then the National Museum in Warsaw is closed on Mondays, but I don't believe we're there on a Monday. I would have to double check.
We're not. I checked.
Excellent.
I'm taking this seriously. And Lisa, I loved your idea of going to the Rathaus in Vienna and
Thank you.
the musical films and the food. So
That was my little surprise for you. You didn't know about that. And I'm like, oh,
I
I
know.
remember about this. We should do this. This is so fun. So the next thing that we have to talk about is step
final
8.
thing.
Our final thing is organizing and sharing your itinerary. And I'm going to go first because I have done this many times. I have not yet found the perfect way. I apologize to our audience out there. So if you have ways that you guys like to organize your trips, let us know. I used to use something called Google Keep, which was excellent because I could throw in articles, I could throw in websites, I could share it with all my friends. I do a group chat, like a WhatsApp group that I will label with the name of our trip. So that's one of the things that I'll use, and I'll share that calendar, but the calendar is not editable because only one person should be in charge of the calendar and making those decisions because somebody has to be the leader. I'm not on our trip because we're all,
well, no,
Not
you
on our
said
trip,
somebody
but-
has to be the leader. Who's it going to be, Lisa?
I don't know. Well, okay, me. It's going to be me. But also, I just wanted to say one thing that I hadn't said earlier. And when you do a trip like this, it's wonderful if you have the kind of buy-in from everybody. It was easy for us to make decisions because we really did sit around and hammer this out. But the problem with making an itinerary by committee is you can get really democratic and you can end up doing what I did with my family over 10 years ago is I let my father-in-law pick something, I let my mother-in-law pick something, I let my husband pick something, I picked something for the kids, and we ended up with 3 flights, rental cars, we killed ourselves. So take what we've taught you and use it to shape a manageable itinerary, maybe even with some sort of theme, because that will bring a more cohesive sense of joy to your traveling group.
Very good. Well, I like to create a shared folder that everyone can access, and that's excellent.
Up in the cloud?
Yes, thank you. Could be Google Drive, could be any number of places in the cloud, Gabe. So this is just an excellent way to store tickets, notes, etc., and then everyone can access and add their own. Because maybe, what would we do? Would we divvy up, like, should I buy Poland train tickets because I'm most familiar with them, and Lisa, you handled Venice and Slovenia, and we all want to be able to share these reservations that we've made, and a shared folder is an easy way to do that.
That's a good
And
point.
I would go one step further and also say I get maybe a little bit doomsday with it, but having things in the cloud is great, but everybody still needs to be able to access the internet. I'm always thinking, what if I'm in a situation where I need to access one of my tickets or confirmations and there's no internet? So I go through before my trip, and this is maybe getting a bit away from itinerary planning,
No,
but
but
it's the
this is
logical
important.
next step of
Yeah.
I take screenshots of every single ticket so that it's saved in the photos on my phone. And then I go a step further and I say, well, what if my phone dies? And so I still to this day have like
No.
a stack of like stapled pieces of paper that are all my confirmations, and I have one physical copy of it. So it just like gives me peace of mind. So it's great to have those cloud sort of things, but also make sure that you have your backups ready.
My backup is an extra battery pack for my phone.
I started carrying that as well.
Are you suggesting that all three of us who have access to the cloud are going to have their phones? This is when you travel solo, probably, Gabe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. But sometimes you're just in a place where nobody gets Wi-Fi.
Yeah, if you're in like a super crowded place and when
Or
you
if
go
you're
to
way
like a
out.
stadium and everybody's using their phones and you can't connect to the cloud.
That's true. I mean, I have T-Mobile, which includes data.
It doesn't matter if you're at a Taylor Swift concert and everybody's.
Well, we didn't put our Taylor Swift concert.
Oh,
on
we
the
should do that.
All right. Well, I think that
It's time to reveal our final itinerary.
Yeah, let's reveal the dream trip, and I think that we should have a letter writing campaign. All our viewers should write letters to Rick to have him pay for us to actually go on this trip and photo document for a future Monday Night Travel.
Yeah,
So-
Steve Camarano said he would follow us around and film us.
Oh,
Yeah, so.
all right.
Okay, so we are going to fly from Seattle into Venice. We will have to transfer in Amsterdam, but we have plenty of time to do that. That's where we will enter the EU, and then we will go to Venice, and we will take a boat to near our hotel, and then we will go, after our one night in Venice, we're gonna go on the Go Opti shuttle over to Ljubljana, where we're gonna sleep 2 nights, right? And then we're gonna rent a car and we're gonna go down into Istria and we're gonna sleep 3 nights in Rovine because there's plenty to do. We're gonna maybe go see the amphitheater in Pula, go up to the hill town of Motovan and eat some truffles and drink some wine. And then we're gonna drive back to Ljubljana and we're gonna drop off our rental car, get on our direct long train. It's gonna be great. We won't be claustrophobic. We'll get up and walk and go to the bar car and it'll be fun. And then we have 2 nights in Vienna.
Yes.
Right? And then we're going to keep going with the train. We're going to go to Krakow, as Ben has taught me how to pronounce it. And then Warsaw, 3 nights in Krakow, 2 nights in Warsaw,
Yes.
and then 2 nights,
3 nights.
3 nights in Gdansk. And while we're there, we're going to go to Malbork Castle, which Ben tells me is one of the finest brick castles in all of Europe.
The largest as
The
well.
largest and finest.
Well, this sounds like a fantastic trip.
Okay, what else do we need to say?
We need to pack our bags and go.
We need to watch Lisa's packing class next. That's the other class we need to plug. Lisa did a great packing class.
Thank
But
you.
I think that we are all wrapped up. So we have a lot of great questions. Aggie has been sending me people's questions. I'm excited to get to them, but I think we have a quick word from our sponsor, Lisa.
We do. So, and this is actually the most exciting thing I could share with you because we're very excited about this new portion of our website. It's called Insights and Updates.
Travel updates and insights.
Travel Updates and Insights, and it's written by the smartest people that we know, and it's going to give you up-to-the-minute news in Europe. So if you're wondering about visas, if you're wondering about Venice's access fee, if you're wondering about anything, if we know it, we're putting it in that section of the website. You can see the web address down there. I would highly recommend doing that, perusing that once when you're planning your trip, and then peruse it right before you leave. Because it's got some good information in there.
Including an article on the new ETA and upcoming
IAS.
ETIAS online form for entering the UK and the Schengen zone of Europe. So that may also be helpful for many of you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lisa. And now we are going to get to our Q&A. So I wanted to start with a couple questions about the planning phase.
Okay.
So one of our viewers asks, how do you make up a wish list if you don't know anything about the country?
You go to ricksteves.com and enjoy hours of content of destinations across Europe.
It is true. I mean, we like to plug some of our products, but we have so many free resources. So if you're at that point where we maybe should have said that step 1 is researching also, just building ideas.
Well, but I mean, I think a little bit I covered it. Like, what do you like inside? Like, do you love hiking in the Pacific Northwest? Well, you will love hiking in Switzerland just as much. So, think about what you like to do, because I think Robin put it on her show not that long ago so beautifully. Like, you want to go see the things that you want to see that are going to fulfill you, because it's ridiculous if you're a history buff and you want to spend all this time at the Louvre, like you're not an art lover. Go to what speaks to you And I think that, so just look inward. Like I was the weird little kid who watched Gone with the Wind and remembers that one moment where Rhett Butler takes his daughter to London and they see Big Ben. I'm like, I want to go there. Like the whole movie's about the South and I see London. I'm going, yes. So think about what really moves you.
And I
And
remember,
then go to our website.
you know, I don't come from a family that travels at all, really. And so what really inspired me are the Rick Steves Europe episodes, because they don't go into too much detail. You just see beautiful places. And I think that that's a great first step, as well as our episodes online.
I have one point of clarification. So somebody was asking, why do you omit the cost when planning if you have a tight budget? And I think that was from, at the beginning, I said, start out by pretending that your budget and timeline don't matter. But of course, reality has to set in eventually. And you might decide that, oh, like I would love to go and get dressed up and go to a fancy opera, but maybe you realize that's not in the budget, but you find a cheaper way to have a musical experience when you're in Vienna. And so
Or you go to Budapest instead, where the opera is cheaper.
I would say every fancy fun thing in Europe has a budget alternative that you can do.
And all of our guidebooks have estimated budgets and costs of things at the beginning of the book. So if you go to the Germany book, it's going to say this is about what it's going to cost you per day. You can get a hotel for this much, etc.
Another question that I think is a really important one in the early stages of itinerary planning is one of our viewers asks, how do you know how much time you need for each thing in a city you aren't familiar with? So how do you kind of budget your time when you're not familiar with the locations?
You have to get familiar with the location. That's what I mean when I said that about Versailles. If you read the information about Versailles or look it up online, you realize, okay, the palace is going to take you 3 hours, but are you going to want to go out to the grounds? And if so, that's going to cost you another 2 to 3 hours. So you have to do the research for that. But most people don't spend more than 4 hours in any one museum. Realistically, yes, you could spend all day at the Louvre, but realistically, you're not going to. I would say a half a day for any major museum is a good rule of thumb. Also,
I mean, this is where I will plug one of our products that you can purchase, but our guidebooks. I mean, when I was on that first three-week trip in Europe with my friend when I was 20, we just had the Rick Steves Europe guidebook. And I think that was an amazing trip. Will I look back on it as one of my favorite trips of all time? Probably not, because I was still learning my own travel style. And so now I'm at a point where the guidebook is super helpful, but I also know myself and I know, oh, I can't do that long in a history museum, but you put me in an art museum and I can go maybe longer than what's recommended. And so using a guidebook, I think Rick and our guidebook researchers do a great job, both of telling you how long to spend in a various city, but even how long to budget for various sites. And then you can tweak based on your knowledge of yourself.
And if for some reason you don't have the Rick Steves guidebook for that place, you could go to the Rick Steves Audio Europe app and see the information in there. But I want to ask you this question because he just told me something. Did you start out as a Rick Steves guidebook user before you ever worked here?
Yes, I referenced the Poland section of the then Eastern Europe book when I studied abroad. Yeah.
And you started out as, we all started out as guidebook users before we ever came to work here.
Yeah, for quite a few years. All right. I also wanted to say one other thing. When determining how long to spend like in each city, I have a pet peeve and I understand it, but my pet peeve is when people say like, oh, how many days is Vienna worth? Right? Like, and I get what people mean, but I'm always like, well, for some, it depends on you. For some people, like it's worth living their entire life there, you know? Or I remember vividly going to Leeds, England, where for me, Leeds, England was not really worth a single day. I'm sorry, people with connections to Leeds, but like the biggest site there is this 7-story armory with all this weaponry, which is not for me, but my friend I was traveling with, he could have like gone there for 2 days to work his way methodically through. So I think another example that you need to know your own interests. And the good news is that you can use your interests from this side of the Atlantic when planning your travels on the other side.
Good point.
All right, quick question for you, Lisa. Can you reiterate what is that name of your favorite restaurant in Venice that you mentioned?
Al Nono Risorto, A-L, next word, N-O-N-O, next word, R-I-S-O-R-T-O, Al Nono Risorto.
El Nono Risorto. I will add that to the follow-up email with the links that will be going out in 24 hours.
Okay.
Remind me afterwards and we'll add it.
If I type it into the chat right now, will that
Oh,
help you
yeah.
remember?
Lisa will also post it in the chat right now. All right, we have time for just a couple more questions. Let's see, well, this is getting a little bit away from itinerary planning, but Lisa, I'm gonna put you on the spot, or Ben, you as well, but on the topic of restaurants, if people don't know their way around in a city, and maybe if they don't have the guidebook, what are some good tips for finding a great restaurant while you're traveling?
I have asked the hotel, and if it's one of our recommended hotels in particular, they tend to have some good ideas, I would say.
Yeah, I have to say, I will be a little bit more fussy. I won't go on Yelp, but Eater will sometimes have some good information. I will ask at the front desk, although I think you're right that our hotels do a good job of sending you to restaurants, but yeah, so the guidebook is a good choice. Eater is a good choice. And I'll often ask like security guards and people in museums because, you know, where do you go for lunch? So is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. All right, a couple more. So Laura, this question just came in that I think is interesting. Laura asked, have you ever planned a trip using AI just for fun? Or what are your thoughts on AI as a tool for trip planning?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
It's interesting. One of our head writers, Cameron Hewitt, actually wrote an amazing blog post. You can find it on our website, in which he went to, I don't remember which castle, but he went to like a castle or a palace in England, and he was doing guidebook research, and he took a description that he had written of this site for the guidebook, and then after the fact was like, hey, I'm gonna actually ask ChatGPT to have a go at this. And he said it was interesting because ChatGPT did a good job, and he even gave it a few prompts, but there are just little things that like you can only know if you are physically there on the ground. Like AI gave one spot for parking that was an option, but Cameron knew that there was a far better option if you parked in the smaller lot on the side. And I think there were a couple things. AI scrapes internet or content from the internet. It had an outdated price for the site because it just maybe finds a price that was listed on somebody's blog. And lastly, he said it was interesting because no matter how much he coached it, so much of what's online is promotional. And so the tone of the description couldn't help but be trying to sell you on the site, when the job of a good guidebook writer is just to inform you about the site and let you make a decision of if you would like to go to that site or not. So I think that certainly I use AI sometimes just as a way to help me with brainstorming, but I wouldn't really use it once I get to the point of decision making, personally.
That sounds reasonable to me.
I am just like, no, thank you. No. I have spent years as a travel consultant honing my knowledge, and so it's like, no, thank you.
All right, well, I have one final question.
Good, because wash that taste out of my mouth. That AI
My
taste.
final question is, looking at our dream trip, which experience are you most excited for?
Oh, that's an excellent question.
So go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna say two things. I'm gonna say I'm really excited for Ben to sort of take the reins and teach us all about the country that he loves the most, Poland. But also, I'm kind of excited about 2 nights in Vienna because it's kind of like a surprise. None of us are going in with a lot of preconceived notions. We've all been there before, right?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, we've been there before, but it'll just be fun to have something just like sort of new and exciting for the three of us to discover together.
I would actually build on that, Lisa, and say, I mean, I'm so excited for all the new places I put on there, but the more you talk about Venice, I'm so excited for the idea of that first night, just being together in Venice, the excitement at the start of a trip. And the longer I travel, the more I have this tension of like, how much do I try to return to places that I love versus go to new places? And so almost all of the trip that we planned will be new to me, but Venice is the place I've been before, and it sounds kind of nice to start out there with something familiar before adventuring to what's new.
I'm glad I didn't put the kibosh on that plan. You know, I would say that while this is an itinerary planning show, we've planned our itinerary, we've done it, and I can say that my answer is something that cannot be planned. And that's the specific experience of getting to know the two of you better for 2.5 weeks in Europe.
We'll see what you say at the end of this hypothetical trip.
Yeah, we'll check in on that later.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you for joining us. I hope that you gathered a lot of great ideas for your upcoming itinerary. And I do want to remind you that next week we have an exciting itinerary in store for you. Cameron Hewitt is back, and he's going to be taking us on a trip report through his recent Balkan Odyssey through Albania and Kosovo and Sarajevo. It is going to be an enlightening hour, as it always is with Cameron.
And with that, thank you everyone for this special evening. We really enjoyed itinerary planning with all of you, and we look forward to being with you next week.
Good night,
Have a nice
everyone.
night.
Thank you.